So as you can see, I'm not currently in Los Angeles. I am back in Delaware with my family to celebrate Thanksgiving. So it's a change of scenery. You may remember this room from back in the good old days. And I'm back here, and this is a different workflow, but I'll adapt and still deliver the news while I am not at my home in LA. Let's talk about Stadia. This is a product that has seen an unfortunate launch where a lot didn't go right or where a lot of features and promises were missing. And one of the big marketing fluffs for Stadia was 4K 60 frames per second. The whole point of Stadia is that they're going to take care of the hardware. They're going to have super powerful hardware that will run these games at max settings and the best visual fidelity and fluidity possible, and we just have to worry about internet streaming. That was the promise. But now that Stadia has launched, we have learned that a lot of games do not run at the promised 4K 60 frames per second, and this is something that a lot of people have picked up on, and it's something that a lot of people are complaining about. And so we're starting to see articles like this crop up. This is from 9 to 5 Google, and the headline of this article reads, "Google is exaggerating the quality of Stadia games, and it's not okay." And then scrolling down here, we will see things like this tweet highlighting how Red Dead Redemption 2 on PC looks really bad on Stadia. So if we click on this, you'll actually see some comparison screenshots like this one right here. And the one on the left is clearly a lot blurrier. This is Stadia. This tweet also highlights how Stadia is 80% faster than Xbox One X's hardware, and yet it runs at 1440p 30 frames per second, whereas Xbox One X can deliver native 4K 30 FPS. And so there's just a lot of questions. The worst thing about all of this is that Phil Spencer is highlighted by this article, explicitly said that all games will be running at 4K 60 frames per second, and you can actually see that be the case in this tweet. So this user asked, "Phil Harrison, will all games on Google Stadia run at 4K 60 frames per second? Be good to get some clarity." Phil Harrison's response reads, "Yes, all games at launch support 4K. We designed Stadia to enable 4K 60 frames per second with appropriate TV and bandwidth. We want all games to play 4K 60, but sometimes for artistic reasons, a game is 4K 30, so Stadia always streams at 4K 60 via 2x encode." So at worst, we were going to see 4K 30 FPS for artistic reasons, whatever that means, but the promise was every game should come supporting 4K, but that's clearly not the case, and it's not just Red Dead Redemption 2. Destiny 2, as highlighted by Eurogamer right here, that game renders at native 1080p and then is upscaled to improve quality, but never reaches 4K. Even on Google Chromecast, which is currently the only platform where you can play at 4K, Destiny 2 runs at 1080, which defeats the whole purpose of Stadia. This article even highlights how Red Dead Redemption 2 specifically was confirmed to run at 4K, but then the tweet that confirmed that has now been swiftly deleted. So on Reddit, here's a user who posted the following thread, whose headline reads, "Red Dead Redemption 2 running at 4K 60 frames per second confirmed. Stadia official account confirmed that Red Dead Redemption will run at max details. Finally, can't wait to play it." And then if we click on that tweet now, though, it'll give you a "sorry, that page doesn't exist" notification. And something else people have noticed is that a lot of these games are running in medium settings, essentially. They're not running at max settings. So all around, Stadia is just, on a graphical level, compromised compared to the less powerful native hardware that we currently have. Now, once word of this began to spread, Google did eventually catch wind of this, and they have issued a response about all of this. It isn't one that I'd call satisfying or appropriate. I wouldn't say this response necessarily justifies the false marketing, but Here's the response, here's how it reads. Stadia streams at 4K and 60 frames per second, and that includes all aspects of our graphics pipeline from game to screen, GPU, encoder, and Chromecast Ultra, all outputting at 4K to 4K TVs, with the appropriate internet connection. Developers making Stadia games work hard to deliver the best streaming experience for every game. Like you see on all platforms, this includes a variety of techniques to achieve the best overall quality. We give developers the freedom of how to achieve the best image quality and frame rate on Stadia, and we are impressed with what they have been able to achieve for day one. Really? I mean, you've got hardware that's almost twice as powerful as Xbox One X and delivers less graphical fidelity, and that's, to you, impressive? Well, a lot of consumers, a lot of customers certainly aren't impressed by that. We expect that many developers can, and in most cases will, continue to improve their games on Stadia. And because Stadia lives in our data centers, developers are able to innovate quickly while delivering even better experiences directly to you without the need for game patches or downloads. So basically, they're saying it's up to developers to decide what resolution and frame rate their games run in on Stadia, but then you shouldn't be promising 4K 60 frames per second if that isn't something that's consistent across the board. And this goes doubly true for games that do run 4K on native consoles, but cannot achieve that on Stadia for some reason despite the greater hardware. It's likely got something to do with optimization, and who knows, over time maybe we will eventually see Destiny 2 achieve 4K 60 frames per second, and same with Red Dead Redemption 2. But what we have currently at launch is a platform that does not achieve a promise and a feature that it's selling. And that's the big thing about all this, is that when you buy Stadia Pro, you are spending something like $10 a month. And one of the feature sets of that $10 a month is resolution up to 4K frame rate 60 frames per second. When you're buying something, when you're buying a feature like that, the expectation is that every game will have that. But if Stadia doesn't run many of its games at 4K and 60 frames per second, what's the point of paying $10 a month? And even in marketing campaigns going on right now, like this launch trailer, you can see that Stadia and Google are heavily pushing this notion that games on Stadia run at 4K 60 frames per second.
Stadia likes to party. Up to 4K 60 FPS.
Yeah, 4K 60 frames per second, my ass. And add this on top of all of the features that are currently missing that they heavily emphasize during press conferences. Add this on top of the botched launch and founders not getting their access codes on time. And layer that on top of plans as a whole just going awry when it comes to Stadia's launch. And we're looking at a product that does not inspire confidence when it comes to its future and its various plans and its various promises. And when you look at this tweet in particular, where Phil Harrison was very clear-cut about Stadia's support for 4K, this is straight up just Stadia 76. This is Google saying 16 times the detail and then delivering a product that doesn't come anywhere close to that. All this marketing fluff and all of these selling points that don't exist. And this response right here, I mean, this is just not enough to excuse the false marketing. They're basically saying that, well, Stadia supports 4K 60 FPS, but whether that's implemented or not, we're not going to enforce anything. I think that Stadia should require 4K 60 FPS on as many games as possible if they're going to advertise that as a marquee aspect of Stadia. And if they're going to sell that to people, if that's a feature that they're going to charge $10 a month for. Just the fact that they're charging $10 a month for 4K 60 FPS, this standard feature now, is ridiculous on its own, but the fact that they're charging money and not delivering on that makes the situation that much worse. If they would have said we support up to 4K 60 FPS, but not all games might run at that resolution or frame rate, especially starting out, and if they would have not charged money for 4K 60 FPS, then maybe this is something that people would be able to get past. But that's just not the case right now, and Stadia is being treated as a product that has launched. It isn't being treated as early access, which is essentially what it currently is. It's being treated as a final product, and so we have to judge it as such. And this final product, plain and simply, isn't ready and is pretty egregious in the way it mismarkets itself and misleads customers and makes promises that cannot be delivered on currently. And who knows what the future holds, but for now, yeah, this is a rough start for Stadia, and this is an unacceptable way to sell a platform. And I'm going to wait for Project xCloud and see what they deliver. They actually seem to be taking their time and doing previews for people who sign up and ensuring that people actually get the best value possible, especially with how you don't have to buy games individually, but rather you get an entire library. So Stadia, I don't know what it's doing right now, and they clearly should have delayed its launch by a whole year at the very least. Give developers time to ensure their games are properly optimized to run 4K 60 FPS on the vastly more powerful Stadia hardware, allowed more time to ensure that all of the promised features are there on launch day to have a great start that kicks off running and that maintains momentum. But that's just not happening right now. They've lost a lot of momentum, and it'll be that much tougher for Stadia to catch up, for Stadia to garner any interest. But that's where we're at, folks. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on this whole situation in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.